Stuck in the bed. Stuck in the bed. Stuck in the bed.
Yes, hello everyone. We are here. It's Mike, it's Casey, it's the Stuck in the Mail podcast. Today we are talking about the album Nightclubbing by Grace Jones. It is my pick, but Casey is the one who has it, which I will forever be impressed by.
I've probably had this for, I don't know, 5, 10 years, something.
Well, and that's a tough. Not only is it an iconic album cover, but it's tough to find in many ways because if you stream the album, it's not there. There's some rights issue. So
Do
commonly
you,
held as one of the best album covers of all time.
do you know the story behind the actual whatever is going on, the copyright or the?
No, I actually don't know the story of why it's not on Spotify.
Okay. Um, I don't either. It always reminds me of that 80s artist, like that Duran Duran cover or something. I can't remember the name of them. So we're very informational podcast this morning.
Well, it's apparently a painting. I do know that. I just
Yeah,
assumed it was a
yeah.
photograph, but it is a painting by her. The person she was involved with at the time is it's a very famous painting that has been on museum displays, and obviously a very striking image. Image being a big part of Grace Jones's whole presence.
Cover painting by Jean-Paul Goude, Goude.
Yep.
So there you go.
That's it. So this album released in 82, I believe.
Oh.
Um, so this is one that I was not familiar with as a kid or a teenager. I think that I probably saw the video to Demolition Man at some point at your house, Casey, when we were teenagers,
Okay.
because I remember being mildly terrified uh, watching that video.
Well,
And
you would have been, 4 or 5, so it's understandable, I
no,
suppose.
we were probably like 12 or something when we saw
Oh,
it.
okay. Oh, much later on. Okay, I was thinking about
Right.
you. Okay, never mind.
No, it was like a throwback thing at the time. Anyway, I don't know the circumstances. I just know that it made an impression on me because Grace Jones is striking as an artist. She's visually
Hmm.
striking. She's auditorially striking. Is that a
Hmm.
word? Orally
That's close.
striking?
That's close. Sure, sure.
Um, striking, that's the word. So,
Yeah.
but then for some reason, so I've gotten into reggae a little bit, and I guess that was kind of what led me to listen to this record because I just
Mhm.
always had kind of had this, I like Grace Jones so mysterious, like what's the deal with Grace Jones? So I kind of got
Yeah.
into it, liked it
She
more and more the more I heard it.
she stands out, and this might be a good talking point. I don't want to interrupt, but she
Yeah.
stands out. There's almost like this WWF like cast of characters from the 80s. You got Cyndi Lauper on the androgynous side. You got, I guess, Billy Idol. You got the superstars like the Prince, the Madonna, and Michael Jackson. But
Bowie.
somehow in this world of MTV characters, superstars, you have somehow Grace Jones. And I actually asked Sarah, I said, do you think Grace Jones was a more likely star in the 80s? Or she would be a more likely star now. And we both agreed that it would be the 80s. And it's kind of odd because there is this progressive factor with her and
Hmm.
her persona and her androgynousness. Oh, actually, I forgot David Bowie in that cast of characters. I guess he counts. I guess he
Absolutely.
kind of already falling out a little bit. David Bowie really didn't. He wasn't like a star in the 80s. He was the Goblin King. So, anywho, I just think that's a fun. I like the idea of an image of those characters.
Yeah. If there's a Mount Rushmore of like
Yes, yes,
dual stars from the 80s, she'd be
yeah.
on it. Yeah.
Maybe Bruce Springsteen too, but I
Mhm.
definitely on the androgynous side. You got Prince, Grace Jones, and Cyndi Lauper.
Well, yeah, and I think there's a really clear tie you can draw from 70s Bowie to early 80s Grace Jones.
Oh
Visually.
yeah, no, definitely. And then of course Bowie's wife, I can't remember her last name, but Iman is her last name. she was a model, very, very, very dark skinned and very similar to Grace Jones. And of course, David Bowie's wife till death. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I see Grace Jones having listened to this album a lot and just kind of getting into her lately. I'm realizing that so she kind of brought together a lot of different genres of music. There's a lot of reggae, a lot of disco, a lot of
Hmm.
kind of as disco was dying, she was a trailblazer for new wave, which is very interesting. I would consider her a song interpreter. So, yes, she
Yeah.
wrote
Oh, yeah.
or co-wrote a lot of these songs, but she had a couple, like three or four different albums around this time that were very similar in that they were covers, mostly covers of really interesting material. I mean, she covered songs by Joy Division. She covered
Yeah.
like Demolition Man was not even released by the Police yet. Like uh,
Okay.
the
That's a
last
police.
song in this album is a Marianne Faithfull co-write, interestingly enough. So just there's all these different sources that she's drawing from, and I find that her versions of these songs are not always great, but they are often great.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then, of course, with this album, I'd say the two biggest standouts are, of course, the album title, Nightclubbing. And I got another album show here. Nightclubbing is actually an Iggy Pop song from Iggy Pop's album, The Idiot.
Hmm.
And then, of course, Use Me is a complete reinterpretation. I think Nightclubbing is pretty similar to the Iggy Pop one, but Use Me is a Bill Withers song, and the Grace Jones song is a wild reinterpretation and very different, and gives the song almost a different meaning too.
For sure. And
So
that's just it. Is it's not that her version, like Use Me, for example, it's not that hers is better than the Withers. It's just that it's a different interpretation. Both
yeah,
are great. And I love that about a really good cover where it's not attempting to be a karaoke version. It's not, you're not trying to say like the other one is awful and this one's this. It's more just this is, I'm interpreting this song, which makes you experience the song differently.
yeah. I mean, you don't want to get a bunch of covers that are literally karaoke.
Yep, totally. Well, as we look into Grace Jones and look at her life, so she was born and spent her childhood in Jamaica.
Yep.
Then she moved with her family up to New York State. She was a model in New York, I believe, but also Paris
Yep.
before
Yep.
she then turned to music and got a record deal. She was very involved in the disco scene in New York in the late
Yeah.
70s. And
54,
then
right?
and then
Studio
Studio
54.
54, yep. And then with this album, it was apparently recorded at the same time as the previous album, like in 1980. But then this one was released like they staggered the albums. But
Yeah.
they recorded these songs at the famed Compass Point Studios in the Bahamas.
Okay. Yep.
Now, this is pretty interesting to me. So Chris Blackwell is this, English producer who essentially created this musical community down there near Nassau, Bahamas. And the group, the musicians that would perform, they kind of joked that they were like the United Nations of musicians.
Okay.
And the core of the band, the Compass Point All Stars, the core of the band is Sly and Robbie. Are you familiar with them?
Yep. A little bit. I mean, I'm not a reggae aficionado, but I have had some Sly and Robbie stuff before.
So it's a very yeah, they just have this iconic sound that's hard to define, but the reason it resonates with me is because one of my favorite Bob Dylan albums is Infidels, which was
Mhm.
recorded with Sly and Robbie as the rhythm section.
Okay. At
Now,
Compass Point or no?
it was not recorded at Compass Point, I don't think, but it was with Sly and Robbie and Mark Knopfler and some others. So it's really
Oh,
interesting.
okay. Okay.
But you know the song Joker Man.
Yes. Yes.
And I've one of my favorite performances, as you know, is Dylan with the plugs on
Mhm.
Letterman playing Joker Man.
Mine as well for Dylan, no doubt.
So if you are watching or listening and you have not yet experienced the YouTube performance of Joker Man from Letterman,
Yep.
go ahead and watch that. Run, Don't Walk. That, of course, was a dramatic reinterpretation of that song in a punk style.
Yep.
Um, it's so good. but
That's
the album
fantastic.
version is very different. And that album version is with Sly and Robbie. And when you listen to the album version of Joker Man, you're going to be like, oh, this sounds like something off Nightclubbing.
Okay.
It was
Okay.
it
That
was
all makes
record
sense.
it was recorded around the same time, early 80s, and it just has that, Sly and Robbie groove and that kind
Mhm.
of sound. And I just happen to love it. I just love the Compass Point
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah, that's my takeaway, I think, when I was discussing this album with my wife, is that this song structure, I mean, it's all there, but it does have that more of a just a groove, you know? Some of
Mhm.
the songs don't really feel like songs. I think there's quite a few that are just one kind of progression. They don't have, different chord change, like a true verse chorus kind of feel, but I
Yeah,
think
like
that really
Feel
plays
Up.
more on reggae. I don't know if I'm right on that. I don't listen to a lot of reggae, but the songs, the words I would use to describe them are that on night clubbing is it has more of a groove, you know.
Mhm.
Maybe
Absolutely.
she's even doing some lyrics on like while, not writing down, just grooving with the song, you know. Who
Yeah.
knows?
It just has a sort of Caribbean sensibility to me.
Yes, yes. Oh yeah, definitely.
A couple other interesting connections there with Compass Point. Talking Heads Remain in Light was at least partially
Mhm.
recorded there at Compass Point in the
Huh,
Bahamas. Um,
interesting.
that's the album. It's my favorite Talking Heads album. And that one is the one that brings in some African influences, which I think is
Yeah,
interesting too. And Tom Tom Club, Genius of Love
yeah,
and all
yeah.
that, that was from Compass Point as well. So it's a really interesting sort of
Nice.
blend of influences and just sort of a place where creativity seemed to flourish in the early 80s.
Yeah, I almost I don't know what your how much Afrobeat you've heard, but I got into it for a little while,
Hmm.
and especially Nigerian records and recordings have gotten really popular in the record community over the years. I'm
Hmm.
not super versed in them, but the band I really like is called Witch, which is a weird name for a band, but it's actually an acronym. It's pretty crazy. It stands for We Intend to Cause Havoc. But they're a pretty listenable group and they're really popular. Nigerian and Afrobeat records are very tough to find, extremely tough to find in listenable condition. And
Yeah.
there is a real not just island Caribbean feel on this album, but there's also a lot of Afrobeat rhythms as well.
Yeah, I noticed that in the song Feel Up.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah.
That's a great take. So I thought this was a pretty interesting quote from Blackwell, the producer. So he sought this is from Wikipedia. He sought to treat Grace Jones not as a model, but to involve her as a musician. And he wanted her to feel as though she were a member of a band and record her the way bands used to make albums, with the singer and the players doing their thing all at once. So, you listen to this and she just has a presence. She
Oh
inhabits
yeah.
the songs, and that's what makes them so powerful. That's what takes this from being just like a disco pop reggae thing, like throwaway, to really just grabbing your attention.
Yeah, for me, this album, it's pretty easy listening. It's not, I mean, it depends. Not like anyone can just throw it on, but for me, I found it pretty easy listening. I remember when I got it, I wasn't like overly excited about it, but it was just like a good album to throw on.
Hmm.
And I've thrown it on at least a handful of times, as well as playing at Spotify at work here.
Yeah.
And it's an easy listen for me. It's just a groove, you know. There's
Yep.
no there's no real song that you'd expect, kind of a song that you almost want to skip on an album like this.
Uh-huh.
And I don't really think there is. For me, it might be Nightclubbing. The
Hmm.
Nightclubbing is the most brooding kind of like it's maybe one of the least enjoyable ones for me. But like by the time it ends with that, I don't remember the name of the song. I didn't write it down, but the one after Demolition Man, that's the Marianne Faithful one. It's
Hmm.
like this beautiful, real sing-songy like ballad, you know. I don't
Yep.
remember the name of it. Do you
Done
know
it
off?
again.
Yeah, I've done it again.
Hmm.
Yeah. And it's
So
beautiful. It has a beautiful end. It's like, wow, what an album.
yeah, that one comes out of nowhere for sure. So like
Oh yeah.
you spend most of the album with her in that sort of in the persona. The best I can describe it is the album cover. Like she's in that
Yeah. Yeah.
persona for
Totally.
like the first 8 songs or whatever. And I,
And that's Grace Jones. That is her, you know.
yes, and
I
just
saw. I was digging on YouTube last night a little bit, and I saw an interview with her on an early Graham Norton, the British talk guy,
Yeah.
and it was really something. She is just attacking him, actually, and she is such a force. My wife was like, "Wow, she's scary," and I'm like, "Yeah, yes, she's an intimidating person." It was really something, and he's known as an intimidating interviewer,
Hmm.
kind of, British cheeky guy, but wow, does she just stands up several times and is like grabbing him. And it's like, wow. I mean, she's a presence.
Yeah. The
I don't
word
think
that
anyone
comes
disagree with that.
the word that comes to mind for me is imperious. She just has this, she just takes charge of the
Yep.
moment.
Yeah.
She's very aloof,
Yeah.
very detached. I think it sets the tone. The very first song sets the tone for that, Walking in the Rain. She's got this sort of deadpan, feeling like a woman,
Yep.
looking like a man. It was a perfect song choice.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And I love this quote. This is John Doran from BBC Music. So, Nightclubbing, let's see, delved into the worlds of disco, reggae, and funk much more successfully than most of her alternative contemporaries. I love this part, while still retaining a blank-eyed alienation that was more reminiscent of David Bowie or Ian Curtis than most of her peers. And I thought that
Mm.
was an interesting comparison.
Yeah.
Like, she has that sort of dead-eyed, like, I don't
Yeah.
know, aloof is the word that comes to
Yeah.
just she's just cooler than anyone in the room.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I think that was like her thing for a while. Like I mentioned on the last podcast or something, she would have strange cameos in movies. She's in Straight to Hell by Alex Cox, and she comes in, it's a Western movie, but it's really tongue in cheek. And she enters the bar or whatever, and she's with Dennis Hopper. It's just like, what? You know, I mean, talk about two personalities.
I kind
Dennis
of wish that
Hopper.
she was in a high-profile movie in the 80s. You know what I mean?
She is. She is. She's in Conan the Destroyer, the follow-up to Conan the Barbarian,
Okay.
which I actually don't think I've seen, but I think that was her biggest role. So Tina Turner was in Mad Max 2, which is actually, it went Road Warrior, Mad Max, and then Mad Max the Thunderdome or whatever. So it's not the really good one. And that's the one Tina Turner was in. A lot of people do like it.
Mm.
I'm not a Mad Max aficionado. I do recommend Road Warrior to anyone, the first one. But yeah, so Tina Turner, and then I don't know if that was before or not, but that's an interesting dichotomy there.
Yeah.
Truly. But I think that was her biggest role. She probably did some indie stuff though too, but
Well, I mean, I think there's still time for her to be a Bond villain at this point.
oh yeah. Yeah, no, I think she was too. I think she was in a Roger Moore movie.
Oh, cool.
Serious. We should have done our homework better if we were going to enter the realm of movies.
Well,
I think she is. She's in a Roger Moore movie. Yeah.
Well, let's get back to the music because
Okay, good.
I don't want to get too far afield here, but yeah, love that first song. Let's talk about "Pull Up to the Bumper," which for my
Yep.
money is probably the most salacious song that could ever possibly be on the radio.
Yeah.
It's definitely the most
Well,
overt car as sex song that I think I've ever heard.
I watched the video last night. It is just a car video. It's like traffic going in two directions and then her face. Like the whole
Uh-huh.
video too. It's very low budget.
I mean,
Um,
I don't know if you've like paid attention to the
oh yeah.
lyric.
Yeah, I sure have.
Yeah, it would be a candidate for to make Tipper Gore blush. Let's just put it that
It
way.
would. I can't believe it didn't make the Filthy 16. Darn you, Tipper. You need to learn your music.
But it's such a good song, and
It
it's
is.
interesting listening to it. It almost has that, the Chic beat, the one that all the hip hop songs, the hip hop, the hip
Sure, sure. I
the
don't know if
one,
that's the Chic beat, but okay, I'm following.
isn't it from I
I
thought it
always
was
think of
Chic.
it as the modified another one bites the dust.
Yeah,
Boom,
that same thing.
bump, 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 bump.
Nope.
It's another one bites the dust, but it's slightly different.
Yeah,
Uh,
but it's around that, we're talking the early 80s. So, it's
yeah,
kind of around that time frame, which I thought was a little interesting. But definitely it's more relaxed, has more of a swagger to it. And
it's
again,
it's it's a
just the way
great
she
song. It's the
just the way
first single
she
too.
It's the way she deadpans these dirty
I
lyrics.
love the guitar in it. The guitar is what makes it for me when it's like, I
Yeah.
mean, that's great. Also, kind of, again, that's reminding me of like Bowie Young Americans or something there.
Uh-huh,
Uh,
for sure. And then you have Libertango.
yep, that's
The-
the second single, I think.
Yep,
Yep.
and that one was an actual, classical tango composition that she
Yeah.
added words to.
Yep. It's got a real spooky Halloween feel to it too. That's what I wrote down. And a
Yep.
lot of French, which she must speak French because, she was a model.
Hmm.
I meant to add that earlier that like Dua Lipa is kind of like a modern musician that you would kind of compare to Grace Jones.
Yeah.
Very different in look and personality, but someone going from essentially, I guess, the runway or whatever they call it, to superstardom in the arenas or whatever. And I think that takes a special kind of model because I don't think a lot of models have that charisma, you
Yes.
know, I don't want to generalize for all models here, but I would say that most models probably would not feel comfortable singing behind a mic or have the presence, right?
Well, and
Um,
I like the fact that
person.
I love the fact that I've done it again is on here. Like at first I was like, wait, this is total departure. I don't know that this belongs. But the more I thought about it, I love that it shows her range, that
Yeah,
it's not just that she does the whole sort of fashion, you know, unapproachable, dead-eyed kind of thing. Like she can actually emote. She can. So I actually, the more I've heard it, the more I've appreciated that
yeah,
closing song.
yeah. I think it's an awkward second single. I really don't feel like this album has a second single. It's certainly not Nightclubbing. Why the song is called Nightclubbing, I just maybe it's just references her life at that time, being a part of the Studio 54 and all that.
Yeah, so I really like the track Nightclubbing.
Yeah,
I think that it improves over the Iggy Pop version a little bit.
yeah.
Um,
I agree with
I
that.
I think what I like about it is it's sort of this menacing double meaning of, obviously it's going to nightclubs, but also it's the sense of like you're afraid she's going to meet you in a dark alley and club you over the head.
Yeah, I mean, more so than Iggy Pop, I guess, He would just never accost you for a shirt, that's all.
Well, you talked about influences. I think Dua Lipa is a good modern
Yeah.
comparison. You can look
In,
at what
in,
Annie Lennox
in
career.
lineage, but not in personality, like though you
Yeah,
can't put Grace Jones and Dua Lipa together and be like, oh, these are the same thing. Because they're not at all. On
but she
any
was she
level.
was she was influential on many artists to come. So
Yeah,
uh,
their path.
yeah, a lot of people reference Annie Lennox, how Annie Lennox
Oh
had
yeah.
sort of
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
androgynous, sort of
Yep.
persona in the 80s.
She
Lady
belongs to my
Gaga.
WWF. She needs to be in my WWF group. Like I
Yes.
can't believe I forgot her.
Yes, yes. Lady Gaga, would have a lot of you can trace the influence of Grace Jones on Lady Gaga. I would say one of my favorite artists from the 2000s, MIA, has a bit of the
Hmm.
swagger and the I
Love
don't know,
them.
the confidence that you see from Grace Jones.
Yeah.
So I just
Great
think
artist too.
I love this album. I'm glad you seem to like it too.
I do. I really do. It's a great album. I have other Grace Jones albums and yeah, they both got very interesting covers. There's one, I think I already mentioned it in a previous podcast where she's in like some athletic gear. I don't know if you know the one I'm speaking of, but it is really an amazing cover. It is striking. More so than this. I don't know if it's on Spotify, but honestly, I doubt it.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's just I think it's her whatever, her Purple Rain, her Thriller. And I don't think it's a 10, but it's very easy to listen to, very easy to groove to, has that reggae feel. And she's just such an interesting 80s character. And I think it's because of the 80s, that we have Grace Jones. And, for me, if you go farther back, I won't go too crazy, but back in the 60s, there was a soul singer named Jackie Shane who performed as a woman and so amazing, so amazing. But Grace Jones definitely more of just an androgynous feel, but I think the 80s were a special time, you know.
Yeah. Well, and
So
to me, the magic of the album is it's her charisma mixed with the Sly and Robbie production. Like put
yeah.
those two together, that's what makes this an easy nine plus for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it might be an 8 or 9 for me. I don't it's not a 10, but it's an album I've had for a long time. I plan on keeping for a long time. And I think we've kind of really strained it down to the nuts and bolts of it. Are you ready to hear my thing, or do you got some more final thoughts?
That's it. What's next?
Well, we're gonna steer a different direction here and go into a realm that we haven't been before. If you're following us on YouTube and enjoying this, we're at least keeping it interesting. We're not going like categorically through like someone's whole catalog here. So we're gonna do something modern. We're gonna do again. We're gonna do something that I don't believe Michael knows, although he might. It's certainly pretty known. And it's in a new genre, I guess. I guess it's kind of a lot of genres, but we're just going to refer to it as country, not country and western. That died in the 50s, I believe. And it's Sturgill Simpson.
Ah, okay.
Meta modern sounds in country music.
All right.
Fantastic album. And one of the only modern country artists that I truly, 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 truly like. I had a hard time
Good.
choosing the album, but this is the iconic album. This is the starter album. So
Excellent. I'm glad we're
yeah,
going country. This is good.
yeah. I picked this before me and you were discussing a lot of country, so it just kind of happened to be ironic. Um, and again, I'm going to get flack from my wife for not picking a female artist, but you seem to be doing a plethora of that for me, so I feel like we're keeping it balanced, and I think you're
Well,
really gonna like this one. I hope to listen to it today. So.
I'm excited. I always like it when you pick something that I'm really not familiar with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've really enjoyed your picks. They haven't all been in my wheelhouse, but that's kind of the point of this.
That is the point.
This was the first episode where it was kind of like, where this is supposed to be convince me, but I mean, we were kind of on the same level about this album. So
Yeah.
this next one, do you know it?
I
You've
don't
only
know
heard it.
this. I don't know Sturgill Simpson at all.
Okay. Okay. Good. Awesome.
Cool. Well, let's listen and I'll let you know what I think.
Okay. Sounds good.
All
Great
right.
episode.
Thanks, Casey.